Caroline. Okay, chief Calista. Okay, we are back for the final portion of our meeting today on Tuesday. We're going to talk about a budget request, and I would like to welcome Pauline Major up to the table to talk about service-supported housing funding. Welcome. Thank you. For the record, I'm Pauline Major. I'm the Director of Policy and Special Projects for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. It's nice to be with you all. I think it's my first time in front of this committee at some time, so it's lovely to be here today. And I'm going to be speaking today about a proposal to broaden the eligible use of funding with FY24 source to help meet the needs for housing for Vermonters with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I want to be clear, this is not a VHCB proposal per se. It is just however funds appropriated to VHCB. So that's why I get to take the chair on this. This is a proposal that really has strong support from the developmental disabilities community, and Kirsten Murphy, the executive director of the Developmental Disabilities Council of Vermont, is here. And broadly from the group of parents that I'm sure you all have heard from, who are working to find homes for their children as they age, homes that are safe and affordable. And this is work that VHCB has been partnering with this community on over the years, going back to the closure of Brandon, but more recently, we've helped six community projects around the state create 36 homes for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and keep on hearing from communities like Middlebury, like Williston, that have future opportunities to develop this housing if there is a public funding source that can help with that capital cost of building that housing. That's what this proposal is about, is can we identify a source of public funding to continue to advance these projects. So as way of background, the last year in Act 69, the legislature tasked a stakeholder group with creating a report that would create a plan for creating the roughly 600 homes we need for Vermonters with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That plan is called the Road Home Report, and you may have heard about it earlier in this session. But one of its key recommendations was to create a fund, a capital fund that developers and communities could go to help subsidize the cost of building this housing. So that cost is not borne by the residents ultimately who do not have the money to sustain that housing. Senator Clarkson was a member of that committee, really passionate about this work, and so when her committee put together their housing bill S328, they included a fund for developmental disabilities housing. Unfortunately, she worked very hard. She could not identify at that time the source for that with the constraints of this year's budget. She worked with the treasurer's office and wasn't able to find a source there. And so she came to VHCB and said, is there a source that VHCB administers that could support this work? What I've included background on in the memo I submitted to your committee is about a source. So what happened was 2024, the legislature appropriated $10 million to VHCB to support the shelters, building out shelter capacity and creating homes for people exiting homelessness, permanent supportive housing. We fully committed all of those dollars to community projects, and those units and shelter beds are being built around the state. However, there was one project that was going to be permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness that planned to utilize a federal source, the HUD Continuum of Care funding, to provide the operating subsidy to allow that project to cash flow. The federal government this winter changed its direction in its homelessness response policy to shift towards treatment and away from permanent supportive housing. And so that source could no longer be used in that project, making it infeasible as designed. It couldn't move forward as a project serving specifically permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness because it didn't have the operating subsidy to make it cash flow. The projects can move forward. Homes are going to get built, but it's moving forward as low-income housing, traditional low-income housing rental development with utilizing the federal low-income housing tax credit program, which means that $3.9 million that VHCB had committed to that project is coming back to the board. And so what we flagged for Senator Clarkson is that if language is if the FY24 budget is amended to broaden the eligible use of that fund to be not only permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness, but permanent supportive housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that would enable the board next year to keep the momentum going, fund one or two more projects as we continue to look for a long-term solution on how we're going to ultimately build these 600 homes that we need for these highly vulnerable Vermonters. And I recognize this is a policy decision in front of this committee, in front of this body, of broadening this eligible use from specifically targeted towards shelters and people exiting homelessness to this other highly vulnerable population. So I just wanted to flag that. We've certainly let AHS know that this proposal is getting discussed, and they haven't provided feedback on it yet. But what we think we could do is use a portion of these funds in a project that AHS has flagged for us for shelter, and then have a portion of them pre-funded for community housing next year. So that's the proposal in front of you.
Thank you. I do want to just talk about this briefly because before the pandemic hit, this is not the pandemic, but just before the pandemic hit, I invited Gus Seelig to come in. I'm not sure it was before you were.
It would have been before me.
Yeah, it was. And at that time, we felt the need of housing for folks with disabilities. The group of parents is so compelling. And so they talked with me about what can we do. And I asked Gus Seelig at that time, is there a way that the HCP can partition off some funds for this type of housing? And yes, we could do that. So since that time, I think everyone has become really tied to that initiative, that initiative. So I, for one, will very much support this, understanding that it is a deviation from what we're looking at with the homeless population, but also know that these folks could very easily be, and it's a preventive measure. And then finally, I gave up my seat on that 59 so that Senator Clarkson could do her work, that she's really been amazing. Great. Thank you for coming with me today.
Does the committee have any questions? Yes, sir.
That's a question. I'm just trying to understand how this works. Is it that they can't afford to purchase a home, and that is what's really driving this? Is there anything special about the home itself that it needs to be part of help these individuals? I try to understand how this works.
And if you would like Kristen to speak, that would also be fine. It's up to you. I need to do it.
Oh, well, since we have so VHCD, we're on the financing side, but maybe I'll ask Kirsten Murphy to speak to the needs of the population.
So for the record, Kirsten Murphy, Executive Director of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, federally funded entity within the state that works on policy for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I was chair of the Act 69 committee and the lead author of the Fort the Rose Home. So pretty familiar with these issues. Most of the people that we're talking about, and if we are talking specifically, not about everyone with an intellectual and developmental disability, but about those people with, what we say, IDD, who are eligible to receive developmental disability services. So in Vermont, that's a fairly narrow band. It's people with an IQ of 70 or below, but plus or minus 5 points, or people with a certain impact from autism spectrum disorder. There are roughly 3,400 Vermonters in that pool. That pool, we are aware that 80% of people in that pool, almost 80%, in almost equal numbers, either live with family members who are aging, often in their 70s already, parents are in their 70s, or people who live in what's called shared living, which is an adult foster care model. Those are the two least stable and least sustainable residential arrangements for this population. Most people do not go on ever to own their own home in this population. This is a population that largely lives on SSI, Social Security Insurance, which, you know, is, I don't know, it's around $880 or something like that now. They may earn some limited wages, but I think the average amount of work hours for someone in this population is under 10 hours. So, and it would be a low wage job. So not a lot of other income sources. The reason that those two sectors of residential services are not sustainable is a lot fewer people are willing to become shared living providers or adult foster care providers for a whole range of reasons. That worked great 30 years ago. And it works great for some people now, but there are not a lot of people stepping up to fill. Those folks are aging too, so people retire out of that. It's not a very stable situation for anyone. And then the parents that have come to us are largely parents that have individuals with high support needs. And these are parents in their late 60s and 70s who are still supporting a son or daughter and are very frank with us that they're maybe siblings, but siblings live in other states, have their own family. You know, the American family today is very, very stressed. They're not necessarily in a position to take on a sibling's needs. So they're a parent, and I am a parent. A parent's greatest worry is what happens to my adult son or daughter after I can no longer care for them, or God forbid, you know, I'm no longer here. And so they want to know that there's something stable, affordable, where they're receiving their services. But it will be a rental situation almost always. And that could look like renting a group home. It could look like renting an apartment. It could rent an apartment, a portable apartment with a caregiver in it. It could look a lot of different ways. But a bigger percentage of it needs to look other than living with parents or foster care providers. Does that help you?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure exactly what
Yeah.
the end result, but we're looking at almost like a assisted living kind of facility or how.
Yeah, assisted living is usually at a larger scale than what our folks
Yeah.
experience. It might look like a small group of 3 or 4 people that want to share a life together. It might look like a group of 3 or 4 apartments within a larger affordable complex. But there's an arrangement with the service provider because these people come with their services already kind of built in. But the housing piece is, we've not done a great job taking advantage of existing affordable housing programs either for this population because we were so reliant on these other types of arrangements. We aren't necessarily looking at building 600 new units. We are looking at building some new units and also getting people into the pipeline for existing affordable housing programs that all the Vermonters that qualify use.
It's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Very much.
So, are you looking to have us endorse this from a committee perspective? I think they're gonna develop it as well. So that's,
So I think what it would take to move this forward, the Sierra and Securities funds for next year is having this committee or you have chair asked to have this included in the budget this year.
Thank you. Okay, committee, I think we are Senator Benson.
To we have to listen to the various about to allow that funding change that goes to the project council letter.
it's, this is already in this language would be budget. It would go as part of, it would be part of,
Yeah.
we would be.
We have a nice liaison to that committee who could do take it over there. Thank you. I thought of that. Yeah. All right, wonderful. If no one else has anything to add, then we can adjourn for the day.